Hello. In this video, I'm going to talk about my first impressions using GOLANG. So this is the first time I've ever used GOLANG for anything before, and it has a reputation as a language that's verbose and lacking in features. So both those things I did come across, but overall I found the experience to be pretty positive, so I definitely come back to GOLANG. Let me first give some context as for why I decided to use GOLANG. So the project I wanted to start was something like a Bloomberg terminal for the NBA. So the NBA has endpoints that give you JSON for, say, box scores or today's games, or the NBA play-by-play for each game. So that sort of thing is really nice, and I don't want to go to like ESPN, have to click through all their ads, click through like a bunch of BS, autoplay. That all sounds really tiresome, so I wanted like one place for all my NBA updates, and why not make a terminal user interface? So I've never really used terminal user interfaces, or I've never made a terminal user interface before, so I thought that would be a fun first crack at that as well. So my first thought was to use Rust. Rust has nice JSON deserialization into a Rust object with Serde. But then I looked into the Rust terminal user interface world, and that world, it didn't seem super appealing. Also, Rust just has some real warts to it. I found that, for example, if you want to use async, then the complexity increases dramatically. If you want to use traits, that increases the complexity dramatically. So all this stuff, I mean, I probably could have used this and it would have worked, but I was like, hey, why don't I use Go? I've never used Go before, and Go seems like it'd be perfect for this sort of thing. You know, fetching from an endpoint, opening up a terminal user interface. So I found this little terminal library. Which one was it? I don't even remember. It was not this one. Wow, the one I found was actually not even on the front page of Google. I believe it was TView. Yeah, this one. So 8.9 stars. Pretty good experience using this. Good documentation. Obviously, this project is not, it's not fully formed yet, but I think it has potential to, I think the language and the library have potential to solve the problem that I've been set out to solve. So without further ado, let's get into my first impressions of GOLANG. And I pull up the code. So, my first impression of the language, writing some of this code, is that it reminds me of C++ or Rust in that it's compiled and it's relatively low level. At least it seems that way. It may not actually be, because it's garbage collected and has a whole runtime. But it feels low level. It feels like you have control over small stuff. But it also feels like it's been completely neutered, as opposed to something like C++ or Rust, where you pretty much have all the features you'd ever want in a programming language, like pattern matching or like some types. You could have macros and stuff. I'm blanking for some reason, but you know, like a lot of features that Go designers have decided to forgo using. And the name of the game really in Go is removing features for a couple of reasons. One of them is fast compilation. Another one is fast like IDE completion. I'll get to more of that in a second. And ultimately, like this sort of philosophy of fewer features is better has led to the language being very like powerful, because there's fewer weight that the code base necessarily has to carry. So it's sort of harkening back to what I've talked about before. Go sort of lives via that principle of let's not bring complexity in when we don't need it, or let's not bring anything in because it could be a source of complexity down the line. So let's just really use restraint when designing our language to make sure that we don't hit any unintended complexity down the road. But my first impression was that it's not really like C++ or Rust. It's not really trying to replace C++ or Rust. It's trying to replace Java. And it really does a good job replacing Java. So what is Java, or where does Java lie? I'd say Java lies in between scripting languages like Python, Ruby, JavaScript, and system languages like C, C++, Rust. So Java really sits right in the middle there, and it's an important place because stuff like this, like backends, they could all really use a language that's not, it's not so like wishy-washy like a scripting language, but also pulling in C++ or Rust just to make a backend could be a bit of a overkill. So it really lands right where Java lands, I would say, in the same niche, but it does a lot of things right that Java got wrong. So one of those things is really good type inference, really good IDE support. So this thing has the best and most responsive LSP that I've ever seen. So if I make a variable like f, it'll immediately pop up. There's no latency at all in that LSP. That is fantastic. Really good type inference. I don't think I have a single type annotation in this whole program. I may have, well, yeah, you have to annotate your arguments, obviously, but very few type annotations throughout. And it's overall pretty quick learning curve, so I was able to get this up and running in a couple hours last night. The tricky part was JSON unmarshalling into a Go struct. So what I had to do was I had to take the JSON and use a generator like this online tool to create the struct in Go. So that was a bit strange, but I guess that's how you would do it in any language where it's not really feasible to hand write your JSON schema. So I guess it's not really strange at all, actually. It was surprising how big this this struct in particular ended up being. Now I'd also say had some problems with the JSON fetch. I'm not sure what the issue was, whether it was a skill issue or whether it was a lack of understanding of the APIs. But I found that the error handling in Go, which is sort of infamous, it's infamous for being Go code being littered with if error equals not equals nil. It makes no sense. At least it makes no fucking sense. But I assume that eventually it will start making slightly more sense. But you know how in Rust and Zig does this. You can just call a function. So it's say fn that could error. And then in Rust you just put that this operator, which means that it returns from the outside function if it errors. It just returns that error. And in Zig, I think it's the same in Zig. It's just you would say try that. I don't know. I've never used Zig. But in Go, for some reason, it's you have to do response error equals something like an error, and then you have to check, and then you have to explicitly return here, I think. Otherwise, it'll keep going, and it'll only return. And then it just makes no sense, and I don't understand it. But that would be my only major issue with the language. I don't really mind that it doesn't have stuff like tagged unions and pattern matching. I think that's by design. It definitely could have those things, but that would add complexity that most of the programs you're writing in Go won't really need that. I would say the module system is also something that I don't really understand, but that's normal. That's usually something that's tricky. In any language, it's always opaque at first. Let's see, what else did I write down? The tooling is great. So that's one of the things that gets better than Java, as well as the sort of syntax stuff. The tooling itself is fantastic. It just works. There's no complaints there. And the documentation's overall pretty good. So I would say Go is a good language. You have to know what niche it fills. I don't think it's a Python replacement for, quick and dirty scripts, but I don't think it's a Rust alternative either, because it can't really do a lot of the stuff that Rust wants to do. So I'd say it's really a Java replacement, and a good one at that. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening.